My dear brothers and sisters, how grateful I am for the marvelous messages of this conference, and for my privilege to speak with you now. For the more than 36 years I've been an apostle, the doctrine of the gathering of Israel has captured my attention. Everything about it has intrigued me, including the ministries and names of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their lives and their wives, the covenant God made with them and extended through their lineage, the dispersion of the 12 tribes, and the numerous prophecies about the gathering in our day. I have studied the gathering, prayed about it, feasted upon every related scripture, and asked the Lord to increase my understanding. So imagine my delight when I was led recently to a new insight. With the help of 2 Hebrew scholars, I learned that one of the Hebraic meanings of the word Israel is "let God prevail."
Travis, my good soul. Doing the video yesterday, I made the connection that Nelson is doing the exact same pattern of gathering to Zion that Brigham Young did. It is not in accordance with prophecy, for the true Church of the Lamb, led by the man like Moses, and that becomes obvious with the clip that I'll have at the beginning of the video here from the October 2020 conference, where he botches the translation of Israel, "let God prevail." And knew there was something I needed to have up on the screen ready to go. But Israel, okay. Genesis 32:28. I intended to have go over the Hebrew with you. Blue Letter Bible. It's 32:28 or 28:32. 32:28. And Westminster Leningrad Codex. So, Israel, in the Babylonian Hebrew phonetics for the script, it's Yod, Shin, Resh, Aleph, Lamed for Israel. And the word for prevailed is supposed to have the word contained in Israel. Because God is, even though they use Elohim rather than El, Elohim is the longer version. And so we should expect to find Sir or Yishur for prevail. And unfortunately, it's not. It's kol. Kaf lamed. It's not even the right spelling. As you go through the other names, you see that there is a connection. And so, in this passage, the connection to Yod Shin Resh is prince. Shin Resh. And so that's not one of the Hebrew translations. The Hebrew scholars at BYU either lied to President Nelson because they don't actually know Hebrew, or Nelson lied to us, throwing the Hebrew professors at BYU under the bus. Why is this significant? Well, let God prevail is the white supremacist interpretation from the English King James Version. It's white supremacist because they're anti-Semitic. They want nothing to do with Hebrew. And so they purposely make up definitions, not even bothering to look up the original Hebrew. And so as it is in the text, and has prevailed, they've put that in place of prince and create a whole new translation that is a complete joke. And Nelson and I have been going back and forth in regards to the latter days and the gathering of Israel. We are told in our scriptures that there is to be an exodus to Zion. That it's not a, we're here and we're just going to rebuild what was destroyed by the United States of America. Because the church doesn't tell us church history. They don't tell us the truth of church history. They leave things that are not faith-promoting out of church history. You know, such as committing crimes and the United States shutting them down. And so, yes, you've got a whole bunch of Mormons who are triggered as weapons for the church to deny anything that's not faith-promoting, to deny the truth, to change the truth, just as Nelson's doing at the pulpit of conference. And this makes it difficult to communicate with Mormons. And I've seen over the years, as he's been plotting, setting things up for his Zion, and I'm trying to do my videos talking about the Exodus and hearkening to your Christ so that you can be saved in Zion after the Exodus, that Mormons are sheep. Bah. Literally. And because they were born and raised in the church, they only know the prophet's voice, but they don't follow him. The prophets tell Mormons to do things, and Mormons don't do them. but Mormons will give lip service. All prophets are true, church is true, Book of Mormon is another testament of Jesus, Joseph Smith was a Christian who spoke with Jesus. And when the church went through their anti-intellectual phase, weaponizing intellect, knowledge, study, they had to change it. So now it's read, ponder, pray, get a spiritual feeling, and you now know. Faith no longer, you now know. You had a feeling, and nobody can take that feeling away from you. And it's your own personal feeling. And so when other people have their feeling, but it contradicts your feeling, they're wrong, you're right. So the Book of Mormon's wrong when it says that it was written in the learning of the Jews. Because your feeling told you that it's another testament of Jesus. When Joseph Smith says that the church was the Church of Latter-day Saints, you don't believe Joseph. Goes against your spiritual witness. Because you prayed for, is it the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? And the spiritual witness said yes. So Joseph Smith is wrong too. He was wrong because he saw Jesus. He was wrong because he saw Moroni. And he was wrong that it was golden plates. And he was wrong. He was wrong that it's Jesus, not the man like Moses. Because Nelson never claims the keys of the gathering, which is Moses' keys. He replaced Moses with the keys of Peter, which is to preach the gospel, to minister the gospel. The keys of Moses is for the latter-day gathering of the Exodus. Thus, the president of the church, under Joseph Smith, is the man like Moses, from Deuteronomy 18:15 through 19, which Joseph instead takes us to Acts chapter 3, verses 22 to 23. Isn't it? Or was it 22? I think it's 20. Acts 3, not 23. Acts 3. Wasn't it? So frustrating. And verse 40. Third chapter of Acts here. And so the Book of Mormon, 2 Nephi chapter 3, goes over this. Because it's in the learning of the Jews. The Christ is the learning of the Jews, man like Moses, Messiah, Christ. Messiah and Christ mean anointed. So when you read in the scriptures about a king, they're the Messiah. They're the Christ. Christianity stripped that understanding and translation from the world. So for the Jews, the Christ is human. And so all the prophecies and all the scriptures are not about supernatural Jesus. They're about a human. And Joseph Smith gets more specific with us. Because the Book of Mormon says that Joseph Smith is a Christ, be the founding Christ of Mormonism, and then says that there will be a latter-day Christ from within the great and abominable church, holding Mormons hostage. Verse 16 in section 103. Therefore I will raise up, from Deuteronomy, same word pattern, unto my people. He's going to be a Mormon, a man who shall lead them like as Moses led the children of Israel. The man like Moses. Verse 17, ye must needs be led out of bondage by power. Even so shall the redemption of Zion be. Joseph Smith is prophesying of the gathering to Zion with an exodus. Nelson is not. He's trying to restore what the United States had shut down. And so Brigham Young was secretly practicing polygamy. He was the secret combination within Joseph's church to constantly get Joseph Smith in trouble with the law, to get him out of the way so that Brigham Young could run the church. It was Brigham Young and his Danites who lied on their missions, saying that it's a Book of Mormon is another testament of Jesus Christ. And so Joseph Smith was forced to do his visionary accounts. The first vision, second vision, etc., to set the record straight of these evil disposed missionaries of the secret combination within his church. And they had their headquarters in Adam-on-Diamond. And for those of you who haven't watched any of the videos where I mention it, this is the death threat that the church sent me, because I had figured this out. So yes, they murdered Joseph Smith. They've been trying to murder me. Exact same pattern. Nelson is practicing polygamy in secret. They will not take Section 132 out of the Doctrine and Covenants. Brigham Young purposely forged it with Joseph Smith's name. And so the United States let it go, as long as they had the official declaration. But Nelson, with the 2019 temple change to the law of chastity, now allows for polygamy. Orders it even. And so, like I said, Mormons are not being obedient. They are not rich and prosperous and divorcing their wives to marry other wives in the temple and then divorcing them. That's the loophole in the system that Nelson is ordering Mormons to cheat the system with. And only those who are obedient will be rewarded when he builds Zion. So if by chance you're still a Mormon and you're listening, which is not likely, you've missed out on the good stuff of all my videos, because I always do object lessons in the beginning, and people get bored with the object lesson and leave and never find out what it is I'm talking about. Your loss. And so Mormons are able to continue to live in ignorance, unaware of the dangers that awaits them. Child bride marriages is one of those dangers. because the FLDS Church and the other branch offs from Brigham Young are still practicing what Brigham Young established. It's only Nelson and this church that had made the United States believe is the true succession from Brigham Young. And so that's why Utah, as Bednar did his video the other day, is Zion. And they put out the call to gather to Zion. But it was through Bednar and not Nelson, because Mormons are less likely to obey the prophets when it's not the president of the church. But the call has been made. It is their gathering time now. In doing his talk in 2020 of October, that was when Mormons missed the Exodus. Mormons chose not to be a part of the Church of the Lamb, chose not to hearken, again referring to Joseph Smith in that verse 40, with the Acts passage and Deuteronomy passage, and to place their lives in great danger. Because again, you're in bondage. They're in bondage. I'm not talking to Mormons anymore. They left. I'm only talking to the converted. And so, if you've noticed, I did a video that, sure enough, I got comments after conference saying, there's no divorce. You're a false prophet. I was right on target. But Mormons are too ignorant to see what Nelson is doing and to even know what the truth is. Because when you interpret the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith's works with a Christian mindset, you're going to have a completely different outcome, which will never come to pass. So you better have a spiritual witness feeling. And it's going to have to last you for the rest of your life. Versus learning of the Jews' mindset, which is completely different, but spot on target. Because we're in the latter days and the last year of the latter days. This is the bicentennial year of the day that shall burn as an oven that Joseph Smith had his second vision of, which is exactly the same as Lehi's second vision in 1 Nephi chapter 1, which tied it to the date of the beginning of the latter days with Revelation chapter 12 in the Joseph Smith translation, moving verse 5 to verse 3. So the Smiths knew about this as well. And so gather yourselves unto the land of Zion. And so it's the Danites who did an election fraud that is the same thing that Nelson pulled. Election frauds. And the federal government is compromised to the church. They will not hold the church accountable. And that's placing all of our lives in great danger. And I've tried to warn you about the church putting forth their exemption clause using LGBTQ rights to merge it with. Because in so doing, once they own the land of Utah, they can now say, we're exempt from following the laws of the land. If you are not Mormon, you do not have a temple recommend, you do not get entrance into our kingdom. That's the whole point of this, is that Brigham Young, when it became necessary to murder Joseph, as he had a backup plan in creating the Council of 50, which is a secret combination anti-government organization. They were seditious conspirators, these Danites led by Brigham Young. And as Joseph Smith was running for president, it was their intention to continue on a larger scale with the United States what they were doing to Joseph Smith, getting him in trouble with the law. And so as the Council of 50 would order their Danites to continue the plundering, murder, and rape of the neighbors, President Smith would be getting in trouble. And he would be assassinated on the presidency, and then chaos would ensue, and the government would fall into ruin, and they'd rise up with a kingdom again. And Brigham Young would have his kingdom. But instead, Brigham Young had to flee. Fled the country into Mexico territory, murdered the inhabitants so that he could establish his kingdom. And then the United States took possession of the land the next year, dethroning Brigham Young. And so then Brigham Young pulled the gathering stunt again, because he first only gathered the rich and those who were secretly practicing polygamy with him. And when the United States took over in 1848, in 1849, Brigham Young said, we need more Mormons. We need to bring the poor people who were converted to the church. And he'd already set it up to tell all the converts that the name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so when he gave the call, they came to him, because that was the name they knew the church to be. And so the poor came, and many of the poor died during the wintertime, but others made it to the valley and were instantly put into slave labor in order to gain citizenship. And because in 1851 Brigham Young established polygamy publicly, no more just in private, it was now sex trafficking. And that was Brigham Young's gathering, to try to increase the number of Mormons to get an army to go up against the United States in the future. But the United States came in and squashed them, forced the Salt Lake Temple to take 40 years to build. And Brigham Young had to do other tactics. And in 1887, the Edmunds-Tucker Act shut down the church. It ceased to exist on the face of the earth. But because Brigham Young had changed the succession to the president of the 12 to become the president of the church, Wilford Woodruff was the president of the 12 after John Taylor died in prison. And so, years after, he made a deal with the United States to keep the church running as he led Mormons astray to believe. So official declaration number 1, verse 11. He outright lied to Mormons. And so, yeah, that's why the other branch-offs were pissed and went their own way. It was because the church fell, and they knew it. And Wilford Woodruff conceding to the United States indicated he was a false prophet. And so they started their own branch-offs. And so these same types of things are being done by Nelson. Still secretly practicing polygamy all these decades because the church does not accept civil divorce. So when a Mormon gets divorced, when Mormons get divorced, the wife is still sealed to her husband. And it had always been that she had to be unsealed to her first husband in order to be sealed to another man if she wanted to remarry in the temple. And the United States has no problem, but she can't do it unless the church gives her permission. She'd have to get civilly married or married by a bishop previously. Did Nelson do away with those so that it now has to be a temple marriage? Can't remember what I heard on that one. Yeah, he bypassed it so that there is no sealing for time only in the temples, and if you have sex as an engaged couple, it's okay. You don't need to confess anything to your bishop. You can still get sealed in the temple because you're going through the process to get married. You don't have to wait a year. So, yeah, all of those couples who were trying to bypass the system to snag their man, as I was a victim of that with the first wife. She wanted to make sure that I was hers, and she didn't need to, but I'd already proposed, but she wanted it rushed. She didn't want to wait. And so she lied to my bishop, who was my uncle, to have him tell my mom to force a marriage. But I was really tempted because he gave me two options. And he didn't give me a third option. He said I can either go back to Southern California with my mommy and daddy, or I can marry her civilly. And so, even though I knew I just got betrayed by her, it still was better than going back to live with my parents. So, but that led me on the path to where I am today, with all that I know today. I should have married Leanne. That is my one and only regret in life. But regardless, because we would have been married on May Day. But I'm curious as to what room in the Salt Lake Temple we would have been sealed in. That would have been very interesting. But I'd never been married before. I don't know how to provide for a family. My dad didn't teach me. The school system didn't teach me. Looking back, I probably should have just talked with her about it. She probably would have known more to help us. My bad. But regardless. And so, there have been many Mormons who have at least one, sometimes two, sometimes more, spouses that they're sealed to. But the church says that you can't have sex with them. No sexual relations except to your husband or wife to whom you are legally and lawfully wedded. And so Nelson is still keeping that up, but he's bypassed the civil government now, the federal government, state governments, to say according to his law, which is section 132, which the plural pronouns correspond with polygamy in chapter 132, which talks about the law of polygamy. His law, his higher law. That's what Nelson was telling you all these years when he said Jesus' higher law. And the manuals were changed to put in higher law when everybody else in the world knows nothing of a higher law of Jesus. He didn't come to create a higher law. He fulfilled the prophecies. Everybody knows that. So yeah, Nelson has been changing doctrine of Mormonism, hinge pointing from that one conference that he did. Because it's all about the gathering. And so this is what they're doing. They're calling out for the rich who can afford to divorce and take care of the ex with those children. And so they'll be rewarded when they gather to Zion now from the four quarters of the earth. He is forcing the fulfillment. And he's not the guy. He's not the man like Moses. He's the Antichrist. He's Mars, not Jupiter. And that's the sad thing, that I don't know if... I can't see Mormons knowing about it, because when I tell them that the Book of Mormon's in the learning of the Jews, they're like, what? Huh? But Jesus. But yeah, his push for the name of the church automatically told Mormons this is the great and abominable church. Because the first vision, Joseph is telling us Christianity is all wrong. And that the first creed of Christianity, which created Christianity, which created Jesus as the Christ, is an abomination. And so the great and abominable church is the one that takes the name of Jesus. And Nelson's telling us this. When you leave out the name of Christ, you inadvertently remove him as the center of your focus of your worship and your life. He raised an idol god to Mormons. And all Mormons missed it. And so Mormons are going to miss that the gathering has begun. Mormons are still talking about, oh, we gather to where we are converted in our own land. Adamantiaman has already happened. It's the gathering time. Because you missed the actual gathering of prophecy in 2020, when the waters of the sea parted so that Mormons could pass through on dry ground, when creeping death spread across the world. As we're seeing the 3 days of darkness. And Mormons knew that their Christ was prophesied to be tortured by the great and abominable church, to be attempted assassination by the great and abominable church, though they believe he was assassinated, and that he was tortured because they believe it was Jesus, when Jesus did not exist until Constantine created him. There was no Christianity except for the learning that all kings are Christ's. But that's not Christianity as we know it today. That was created by Roman Emperor Constantine. He was technically the Christ. And he still raised up a Jesus as the Christ to fool everybody. And so you got all these myths of Constantine that he confessed on his deathbed that the church he created is true. So and so I think I covered everything. It's the same pattern. Yeah, I got all the notes, it looks like. So, yeah, it's sad and tragic because Joseph Smith warns what will happen if Mormons refuse to hearken to their true Christ. Utterly destroyed. He can't even come out and say it. He says cut off instead. You have to read in other places and to learn about utterly cut off. You have to look up the reference to know it's destroyed. And Mormons are just not taking this seriously, as they're not catching on that Nelson has started the gathering, that Nelson wants them to be polygamous on purpose, to bypass the law in secret. And then when they establish their kingdom, it'll be announced openly. Polygamy is the way. So all of you who have been sealed to a spouse, you need to go back to him now. And if you don't want to be back with him, Brigham Young says you're supposed to die. That's what he tells us in section 132, blaming Joseph for having written it when he replaced monogamy for it. Mormon women don't understand this. Mormon women are enjoying having agency, being free to choose a career, to go on missions, to wear pants. And you don't see what's coming. They don't see what's coming. Because again, I'm talking to the converted. And it's going to be sad if the church wins, if they get away with it. Because they're doing it all in secret right now, little by little. all preparing in advance. And I've been the only thorn in their side that has forced them to delay things. See, even with the Bednar video, that was supposed to be for conference. But I did my video in advance. And so, yeah, that's why the church is pissed with me. But that, I think, is the last conference. Because even with 2020, they, I think, were expecting to close down conference altogether as well. But because of me being a thorn in their side, they had it, but denied people attending the conference center. So, it's lonely taking on the church all by myself. It's lonely knowing all about this and having no one to really share this with. You know, I do the videos, but the majority aren't listening to the end, and those who do listen to the end are not communicating with me on a regular basis. There's only one person who does, and he's not a she. And so, yeah, Mormon women think that I've had my chance and I blew it because I'm an apostate, so I don't deserve a third chance. I don't deserve a third time's the charm. I don't deserve love. And so Mormons think that my agency should be taken from me. Squeaky brakes. And I found out that this audio is very good. Because what I hear with my ears, I hear louder when I replay the video. So that probably hurt your ears. So, but yeah, the prophecy says he's supposed to get married again a third time, because the prophecy says he has 2 failed marriages. And the whole point and purpose of being coronated as king, Messiah, Christ, is to be sealed with a woman. Because he can't be king without a queen. Because the whole purpose is to have children. And so that can be frustrating when those who are of breeding age find me very unattractive. So yeah, I do see that in the stats. Those who are of breeding age, female breeding age, do not watch my videos. They came for the content. I did object lessons in the beginning. They left. They wanted specific information. I didn't give it to them right away because of the TikTok education that they now have. And they left. So, but lots of things have happened miraculously to fulfill the prophecies. But this involves another person's agency. And for that, there is always the probability that a woman will refuse, even if I'm the last man on earth. But yeah, the war in Ukraine, yeah, the Danites started the Mormon War. All of it is the exact same pattern. This was their plot. And this was the coding. So, alrighty. It's 50 minutes. I want to go to bed. I wanted to go to bed now.